Good evening and a very warm welcome. I'm Sana Khan. Welcome to our marathon broadcast this evening.
And I'm Ramesh Ramachandran and you're watching Gravitas.
After months of acrimonious campaign, mudslinging, name-calling and all that is usually not associated with a US presidential campaign, Donald Trump takes oath as the 45th President of the United States in less than an hour from now.
On Gravitas tonight, as we count down to the big moment, we take a look at the man, his cabinet, his promises, and of course, what his presidency means to the rest of the world.
Well, the days leading from November 8 to the inauguration day has also seen some unprecedented protests from a significant section of the American population, and the protests continue right to this day of the presidential inauguration. Well, through this special broadcast of Gravitas on the historic inauguration day, we'll be joined in by WION's correspondents from different bureaus and journalists who will be giving us a sense of what this presidency will look like.
And on tonight's show, we'll be joined by Nirmal Ghosh, Washington Bureau Chief of the Straits Times of Singapore, Ken Moritsugu, Tokyo Bureau Chief of the Associated Press, Sonali Chitre, climate change expert, Atul Aneja, China correspondent of the Hindu newspaper, Dr. Sesh Kumuri, Technical Director, Nevada Advanced Autonomous Systems Innovation Center from the University of Nevada in the US, Suzanne Goldenberg, writer and formerly Guardian journalist who joins us from Washington, D.C. And in the studio, we have Dr. Harinder Sekhon, Senior Fellow, Vivekananda International Foundation.
Well, also joining us on the show will be WION's correspondent, Giles Gibson. He's the bureau chief. He will be joining us from Washington, D.C. Mandy Clark, she'll be joining us from London. Taha Siddiqui from Pakistan. Anchal Vora, she's our West Asia bureau chief. We'll get to all those reporters in just a bit. But first up, we have with us Dr. Harinder Sekhon. Ma'am, thanks so much for speaking to us and joining us here on this special broadcast. Big day today for all Americans. The entire world is watching. The big question right now is, and everybody's focusing on Donald Trump's inaugural speech. What's he going to say? What's the theme going to be?
I think he's going to try and sound very presidential, as he did soon after he was elected. And the message, he has to leave some kind of a legacy after having won the election, after a very bitter campaign, and he's also aware of the fact that he inherits a very divided society. He inherits a very divided country. So I think he is going to send across a very positive message of peace so that at least he starts on the right positive note. Immediately, what has been anticipated that he is going to undo a lot of the legacies of the Obama era, especially the healthcare reforms.
He's already started off.
And he's already started making statements, then immigration and all. So that is going to be the next part after he's assumed the office. But I think in his speech, he's going to reach out to different sections of society and also his political opponents from both within the party and the Democratic Party.
And Dr. Sekhon, talking specifically about South Asia and India in particular, what would a Trump presidency mean for South Asia in general and India in particular?
India was one of the countries where he did not refer much to India. Whatever references came up during the course of the campaign were very positive in nature. But Trump is an America First believer. And I think being a successful businessman, successful or not is debatable, but being a businessman, he's going to run his presidency more like a corporate CEO. So it is going to be a very transactional kind of a relationship with all countries. India need not fear, because whatever he said about Indians, even the IT H-1B visas, he said that they are they make a positive contribution to the US economy. But of course, there's going to be a tightening of H-1B visas. Maybe we'll come down to that later. But strategically, I think he realizes that India is a stable democracy in an unstable neighborhood. And that is a positive advantage for India. And I think we need to capitalize on this geostrategic advantage which we have, especially with Trump making the outreach to Russia. And this goes in India's favor because Russia, which was increasingly isolated by President Obama and weaning towards China, and now Pakistan, the military exercises. So this is an opportunity which India would get to seize upon and like strengthen, go back to its previous partnership with Russia. So I think on the whole, it would be a positive start for India. We really have nothing to fear.
All right. In fact, I'm being told our Washington, D.C. correspondent Giles Gibson is online with us. Giles, thanks so much for joining us there. Where are you at the moment and what's happening around you? How much time to go?
Sana, I'm just off the National Mall, so I'll just turn the camera around for you. If you're looking towards the way the camera is facing, that's the National Mall. I'm just by a Black Lives Matter protest. I'll just turn the camera around so you can see that. These people have been standing here all morning talking about how they're protesting against Donald Trump. They think he's bad for minorities in this country. They think he's going to be bad for this country over the next 4 years. There are also lots of Donald Trump supporters around. I've been speaking to some. Actually, we're seeing arguments breaking out on the streets between Trump supporters and Trump opponents. So the atmosphere here is fairly peaceful. There's not been too much any sort of violence or anything like that. But there's certainly a lot of tension in the air.
All right, Giles, also we're going to come back to you in just a bit, but taking a cue from what's been happening in Washington, also elsewhere in America, we are going to show our viewers a bit of protest. In fact, it's the city that never sleeps or loses an opportunity to speak up. Either studies, in fact, have shown that every race, religion and language on earth has at least once representative in New York, the most cosmopolitan city in the United States. But on the day of President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration, New Yorkers are bracing up to speak in one tongue and one voice that will, as always, be heard in Washington, D.C. as well. In fact, our international correspondent Padma Rao has filed this report.
It's argumentative, it's funny, hard and fast, and today it plans to be so loud that it's heard in Washington, D.C., 300 kilometers away. President-elect Donald Trump may have been born in Queens, so he is an epitomic New Yorker, and yet this is one Pippin the Big Apple has steadfastly shunned ever since he won the election in November 2016. New York is also about showbiz, so it's a city where it's not unusual to find a famous celebrity in sunglasses on the Central Park bench next to you. But from satirist Michael Moore to Hollywood stars Alec Baldwin and Mark Ruffalo, the glasses are off and the gloves are on.
Donald Trump and Steve Bannon and Mike Pence and all these people that are part of the Trump administration, they think that you are going to lay down. Are you going to lay down? The one thing that they don't realize is that New Yorkers never lay down. You say whatever you want to about this city, and New Yorkers never lay down. Are you going to fight?
There are more kings of the hill protesting Trump's election right from on top of New York City's heat, like the legendary Robert De Niro, born in Greenwich Village and another son of the soil.
I don't care where he goes. I just never thought he'd go to Washington. He's a bad example of this country, this city, this city, this city. The president-elect said our country was a dumping ground for the world. Really? These huddled masses yearning to breathe free built our country and our lifeblood of our strong, diverse, beautiful New York City.
Inauguration Day is going to be a busy one for New Yorkers. There's a call to action for African-American, brown and indigenous peoples that will take place in the boroughs most heavily populated by non-white working-class people. That is in the Bronx, Harlem, Queens and Staten Island. There's also the Resist Trump student walkout and rally, the Unite Mobilize Against Trump rally in neighboring New Jersey, and the inaugural Resistance Party in downtown Manhattan. Not all New Yorkers agree. Some New Yorkers will be at the stand with Donald Trump during Inauguration March, called predictably at the president's premier address, Trump Tower in the Tony Manhattan neighborhood of Central Park West.
Again, we have to give him a chance, but I think that all the people are here to rally, make a lot of noise, preemptive. I want to see what he can do, but I want him to know that if he wants to make a difference, he can't do it by bullying people. He has to do it in measures of making a difference for all the people, not just some of the people.
And then there are those whose protests have little to do with the inauguration and all to do with the inherent canniness of the New Yorker to seize the moment. There's one demo titled Housing Works and Raise Your Voice for Radical Inclusion and Affordable Care, and another promising participants that a Brooklyn bar will be showing cute animals on their screens all day and night under the motto, "It's going to happen, but we don't have to watch it." Whichever one the visitor to New York decides to attend, New Yorkers, often considered the pulse of the United States, are making it clear that no election result will ever make them miss a single beat. Padma Rao, WION.
Dr. Sekho, as we count down to the inauguration of Donald Trump, the naysayers in the US don't seem to be giving up just yet. Protests, criticisms and Trump phobia, it seems, to have overshadowed the inauguration. What do you think?
You know, he's been so provocative and in his statements right through the election and even before the election started, the campaigning started, especially his comments on women and his own behavior, the tapes which came out of sexual assault and stuff like that. So it's not just the women. So naturally there are women protest marches in Washington, D.C. and I think they continue till tomorrow. And women certainly, you know, he had turned a large number of women voters against him, but an equally large number did come and vote for him. Also, what he's talked about the immigrants, the Hispanics, the blacks, and also creating jobs for white, you know, because he's viewed as a conservative white. So I think in an already where the tensions have been running high in American society, and you have somebody like Donald Trump
adding fuel to the fire.
Adding fuel to fire, exactly. And people are concerned as to what actions he's going to initiate immediately. Does he move people? Because if he vetoes Obama's affordable health care, I think a whole lot of people go out of the healthcare gambit, and that constituency is definitely worried. So are the unemployed, uneducated blacks, you know, who feel that they are going to be discriminated against under a Trump administration, which is focusing on the areas which are conservative, white, in the middle belt of the United States. So whether he would be able to bridge these differences or further divide is something which concerns the people. And that is why, you know, he starts off with a negative thing, all due to his own making, you know, considering all the statements he made during the course of the campaign, and he has not let go even after getting elected.
Right, that's right. So the big question is he going to continue to be divisive, or will he adopt a slightly more inclusive approach at this point? It's anybody's guess. We'll have to wait and watch what Donald Trump actually does in office. But coming to you, Giles, you're there. All right, I'm being told Giles is not with us at the moment, but we'll try and get him back online with us. Mandy Clark there joining us from London, in fact, at this moment. Mandy, you know, on a much lighter note, I want to start by, talking about the First Lady there in waiting. She's apparently reportedly wearing outfits of European designers. Now, is there some buzz there in London about the designers that she's chosen? I hear names of Karl Lagerfeld there, because the tradition is that the First Lady at the inauguration goes for designers from within the US and not perhaps anywhere in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. That was a bit of a surprise over here in Europe, because of Donald Trump's rhetoric about how it's important to stay, make America great again and focus on America, that her dress would be European designed was a bit of a surprise, and welcome, of course. It also, Europe is very much looking for any clues to see how the future relationship with the U.S. is going to pan out. They had a very warm relationship with the soon-to-be previous president, Obama. Now, Donald Trump has said very divisive, negative things about Europe so far. So they're hoping that his words won't match his actions, and in fact, it'll be a much warmer relationship. But there's a very much feeling here of let's wait and see.
Mandy, how are Londoners watching the proceedings, in anticipation of the Trump inauguration? What specifically are their fears or anxieties or expectations, generally speaking?
Well, there's a section of the British population that are protesting this inauguration. There's around 20 protests happening around the UK. And they're a wider group that includes protests in Europe and the USA. It's being backed by around 50 members of parliament, and they're running by the hashtag Stand Up to Trump. Now they are fighting against the notions and the movement of the far right and the dangerous divisions that it causes. That's what they're saying. And their slogan is "Let's build bridges, not walls." And that's a specific reference to Donald Trump's promise to build a wall with Mexico. So across Britain, they're on all the bridges, all along the Thames, at least in London, they have these banners that say, "Build bridges, not walls." And in all the major cities, Manchester, Cardiff, Edinburgh, London, they're staging major protests against his inauguration. Now, of course, this is not all of Britain. This is more left-leaning section of the British population. So there is certainly an anti-Trump feeling in parts of Britain.
All right, Mandy, do stay with us. We'll come back to you in just a bit. But just to remind our viewers, we are tracking this very, very closely, the inauguration of Donald Trump as the 45th President of the United States. And we'll keep getting you live visuals as well and inputs from across the world. At the moment, joining me here in the studio is Ms. Sekon. Ma'am, also give us a sense of, elsewhere in Europe. For instance, I was reading up, Germany's finance minister has urged Donald Trump to stick to international agreements. He says that I don't think a big trade war will break out tomorrow, but we will naturally insist that agreements are upheld. Now, there was a lot of talk about, involving German car makers and the stand that Trump took against them. Give us a sense as to how Europe would generally be looking at events at the moment.
See, Europe is worried on two aspects. One is the strategic, because he has said that the NATO partners need to pay more to the kitty if they want the US to extend the security umbrella in Europe. And so that has got NATO worried in the first place, because, and especially his outreach to Russia. I was in Berlin just about a month back, and there was a lot of concern about Trump, and I did meet with people at the foreign ministry over there. And there's a concern, would Europe become irrelevant if he does the outreach and does the strategic handshake with Putin? And that is Russia's biggest fear. So one is that aspect which Europe is worried about. And second, Trump seems to be coming out in favor of Brexit, and he feels that it is easier for him to negotiate a bilateral treaty and continue to build upon the relationship with Great Britain.
Right.
And this again gets Europe worried, because they are trying to make themselves relevant. And Trump, on the other hand, has a bit of a condescending attitude towards Europe, because he feels that the United States has done more than enough, and all countries do not pull their weight equally. Apart from Germany and France, he feels that Eastern Europe, especially Poland, Greece and all, they need to do more rather than expecting the United States or Germany to bail them out at every step. So I think Europe would really have to, and they really don't know how he would react or respond to the situation, considering that he wants to guarantee employment. He has come on this platform of Make America Great Again. He has inherited a very fragile economic, the economy is looking up, no doubt, but the United States has not recovered from the economic meltdown of 2008. And his first priority is to bring the jobs back, bring manufacture back to the United States. And though Europe has not taken any of the manufacturing jobs, but I think the trade deals, he has also said that he's going to renegotiate the trade deals.
And that's something that Europe is really looking forward to, Britain, in fact. Mandy, my next question to you, in terms of Brexit and how Donald Trump views it and offering a trade deal, I think we were talking about it earlier as well. But once again, looking back at it, you were saying earlier on that Donald Trump will view, and a view that has been had throughout the campaign, is America first. So he will keep America first. What happens to the interest of Britain then?
Well, when it comes to the trade deal, he certainly said he wants a quick trade deal. He's going to make it happen. That was welcome to the British public. But you're absolutely right. In reality, he really wants that the trade deal to be really beneficial for America. So, you know, there's two competing forces: doing a quick trade deal, or for Britain, the best trade deal for Britain. Because when you go into a bilateral negotiation, you want the best deal for your side, obviously. So whether they can pull off a quick deal that's good for both sides, that's debatable. So, and he's likely to be a tough negotiator. He's going to have red lines and expectations that he wants to walk away from. And of course, all these trade talks can't happen till Britain leaves the EU. And that on the current timetable, that's 2019. They can have informal talks, but when they come down to the nitty-gritty, that's 2 years away.
Indeed, Mandy. Now we are joined by Suzanne Goldenberg, formerly the Guardian bureau chief and now a freelance writer based in Washington, D.C. Suzanne, give us a flavor, if you will, of the mood in Washington, D.C., even as we speak, with barely less than 2 hours to go for the Trump inauguration.
Absolutely. Good to be with you. Well, it's pretty somber here. I mean, the streets are deserted. It really feels like the city is shut down. This is, I guess I've been this would be my 4th inauguration that I've been in D.C., and it's marked contrast to the inaugurations for Barack Obama's 2 inaugurations for sure, and for George Bush. And there is this kind of unofficial competition going on to see who's going to get the bigger crowds. Is it going to be the official inauguration today or the big women's protest tomorrow?
Indeed, Suzanne, you have the benefit of having lived and worked in South Asia as well. Give us a sense of what a Trump presidency might look like for South Asia in general and India in particular.
Well, I think the first thing I would like to say is that I'm a journalist. I'm always superstitious about giving forecasts and predictions because very often you're wrong. But this is a particularly unpredictable president. That's been the hallmark of Trump. So we don't know what he's going to do exactly. But there's 2 things I think that should concern India directly, and that is that he has said that he wants to be very tough about trade and to protect America from trade and make sure that people buy American. And the second thing is immigration. And there's already a lot of concern here about Indians who are here on H-1B visas. Trump's pick for Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, has said that he wants to limit those visas. So there are 2 real areas here where there could be potential negative impact for India. And going back to this sort of unpredictability aspect, if you remember, he had this extraordinary conversation with Nawaz Sharif in early December, where he called Nawaz Sharif a terrific guy, said he's doing a great job. So you could see some strange things happening with the U.S. as it negotiates this relationship between India, Pakistan, and China, too, which is also be a target of sort of Donald Trump's statements about trade.
Hi, Suzanne. This is Sana here from WION Studios. Thanks so much for joining us. Another thing that one is wondering, and we do know, as you mentioned correctly, Donald Trump is very unpredictable, so we can't say what he's going to talk about in his speech today. But we do know that he tapped Stephen Miller to pen his much-anticipated speech. Any thoughts on what are the key points that Trump would particularly like to make today?
I think today is a day where he really has to sort of go back to this idea that he's a president for all Americans. That's something he said on election night. It sort of eased a lot of people's fears about what kind of presidency he would have. But at the same time, all his actions since then have been quite divisive. And he's talked about his enemies. He's lashed out at critics. He's, done things that are very a big departure from the norms in terms of sort of staying up all night, watching who's talking about him on TV and sort of hitting back. So today is a day where he can sort of make good on that pledge to be so presidential.
Absolutely, Suzanne. Now, very quickly, when we talk about Obama legacy, we have issues such as his opening to Cuba, Iran, climate change, Osama bin Laden, and on the other side we have Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria. His AFPAC policy is not exactly popular in South Asia. Guantanamo Bay is another issue which has bedeviled his presidency. So on balance, when you look at Obama's legacy and you compare that with the incoming president, where do you think Trump's priorities lie?
Well, I think what he would like to do is to undo as much as possible of Barack Obama's achievements, and and that is where things get a little tricky, because what he wants to do is not the same as what Republicans in Congress want to do. And I think, his big priority will be abolishing healthcare, the healthcare plan brought in by Obama. But there's tens of millions of people who now get healthcare thanks to that plan. Even though it's become much more expensive than people thought. But I mean, if he takes away their healthcare plans without giving them replacement coverage that's cheaper or the same price, he's going to be in terrible political trouble.
Absolutely, Suzanne. And very quickly, just two more issues to take up with you. One, for instance, the whole issue of the Israel-Palestine peace talks. Now, there are indications, at least demands or suggestions or speculation that the U.S. embassy might be moved from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. Also talking in the larger perspective about U.S.'s relations going forward with Russia and China. Now, we saw Obama, when he took presidency in 2008, talk about a G2 with China. And soon thereafter, we saw him not give an audience with Dalai Lama. But towards the end of his presidency, we saw him go back on some of those issues vis-a-vis China. Also, regarding Russia, how do you see the U.S. relations with Russia and China develop going forward? And also about the Israel-Palestine issue.
Well, those are the big three, right, for any incoming U.S. president. On Israel, we've had Donald Trump making these extraordinary comments about moving the capital from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. His pick for ambassador to Israel is a hardliner, even within the Jewish community, who supports the most isolated settlements in the West Bank, the settlements that are seen as the biggest obstacle to peace. So, I mean, there are many people who say that this could be the nail in the coffin for the two-state solution between Israel and Palestine. On China, he's talked really tough with China when it comes to trade. I think that's something that we can see some finessing about. On Russia, the security establishment sees Russia as sort of the biggest potential threat to U.S. interests. And that's something where, and Republicans in Congress sort of agree with that assessment. But of course, we've had Donald Trump sort of boasting about his close personal relationship with Vladimir Putin. So I think that's something where the question is, will Donald Trump be forced into the norms, diplomatic norms when it comes to Russia, and will he be forced to sort of go back towards U.S. precedent when it comes to Russia?
All right, Suzanne, interesting perspective from you. We thank you for joining us this evening and sharing your thoughts and giving your valuable time to us at this point in time. That was Suzanne Goldenberg, formerly a Guardian bureau chief, also a freelancer at Washington, D.C. at this point in time. Dr. Sekhon, if I could come to you quickly, would you agree with most of what Suzanne had just said in terms of the challenges, in terms of, whether Donald Trump will stick to norms, whether he will be forced to stick to norms during his time as president?
Exactly. I think she got the gist of it bang on, because within his own party, I mean, Donald Trump has made some statements, but if you see the Secretary of State and his National Security Advisor, when they made their congressional and Senate hearings, they have charted their own course. They have not agreed exactly with what Donald Trump says.
There have been conflicting views, especially
they have stuck
on
to their own,
Palestine,
yes. Jerusalem, and even on speaking about Russia, on talking about the cyber threat and the Democrat election, the networks which were compromised by Russia. So that is not exactly what Trump has said. And even when Trump was confronted with certain evidence about a fortnight ago on the role of Russia in rigging the US election, he said there are bigger things. He was evasive. He did not defend the finding of the FBI. So that shows that once he assumes this office, he has to act a little more responsibly. Also, we need to keep in mind that Obama had also done the Russia reset with Putin. He had tried to do that with Putin. It is good if the two of them can establish, Russia and the United States can establish a working relationship.
Right.
But then John McCain has come out very forcefully against Russia and trusting Putin and Putin's ambition. So it will take time, I think, but the most important issues Trump is initially going to confine himself to are the economic, domestic issues and leave a lot of the Russia and China policies.
For later.
No, not for later. He would probably let his Secretary of State and his officials, because he's supposed to be a person that who knows how to delegate work.
Dr. Sekhar and Mandy Clark, I request both of you to please stay on with us. We're going to come back and continue with this discussion and our live coverage as well.